Hi everyone, my name is Katie Hurd, and my research project and essay are going to be on the environmental and social effects of the French colonization of Algeria. To give some background, as early as the 16th century, Europe was expanding all over the world on a so-called civilization mission to civilize the areas they deemed primitive and barbaric. By 1800, they controlled around 35% of the world, and by 1915, they controlled 80% of the world. Some of the authors described the colonization of Algeria as particularly harsh. They changed cultures and traditions and decreased the previously high literacy and educational rates. French colonization followed a four-pronged strategy: Christianization, the imposition of the French language, the illiteracy policy, and the impoverishment policy. The French troops raped, looted, desecrated mosques, and destroyed cemeteries. European settlers were mainly peasant farmers, working class, criminals, and political deportees who were encouraged in the 40s and 50s to settle where they were offered grants to land for a fee and had to promise to make improvements to the land. The French appropriated 27% of arable lands while the Algerians were displaced from their lands. The French wanted the Algerians to be employed by themselves rather than make their own livings. From 1830 to 1848, there was Algerian resistance, but their abilities did not compare to the well-armed and well-trained French troops. A lot happened in between, but for the sake of this presentation, between 1919 and 1962, when they gained independence, Algerian natives lacked all means of survival and plunged into illiteracy, famine, poverty, and apartheid, yet the settlers had prospered with development, welfare, and domination. They were under total colonial rule. Author Diana Davis has done a lot of work in researching the colonization of North Africa by the French and their connections to the environment. One of the ways she says the French justified their colonization was the notion that they were restoring Algeria and northern Africa back to its former glory during the Roman Empire. During the Roman Empire, Algeria was referred to as the granary of Rome, or a very fertile area of land. After over-cultivating and farming the land, and Arabs taking over the land, the lack of fertility was blamed on the Algerians, which was then used to justify their colonization. They also had a negative view of nomads and their use of the land, while they were more so accepted the Berbers, who were settled people. This is partially because it's harder to control nomads than it is to control and employ settled people. The nomads were blamed for the desertification of North Africa, despite the largest decline of forest occurring during the French colonization of Algeria. As previously mentioned, the French comparison to the productivity during the Roman Empire led to policies affecting the Algerian people. The French saw the land as suffering partially from the immorality of the Algerian people. First was the Forest Code. The Forest Code prevented prescribed burnings, which were essential for the environment, for environmental management and grazing purposes. The code also took away the right to graze sheep and goats, but allowed for pigs. They stopped cultivation in the forest, forbade huts to be built within a kilometer of the forest, and prosecuted those who would gather fallen wood and other materials. Because of these policies, 2.5 million of the 3.2 million hectares were transferred by the French Forest Service. Just 400,000 hectares were owned by individuals, and the most lucrative land was exploited by the French for cork and pine. One of the main resources for the French to import, aside from pine and cork trees, was citrus. There was a rapid expansion over the period of 1937 to 1962. The citrus groves expanded from 10,000 to 40,000 hectares during that time. While Algerians did own citrus groves, these groves were small and made up just 10% of the citrus produced in Algeria. They also did not export their fruit to France and rather would sell it locally, did not use fertilizers or pesticides like the French did. These policies previously mentioned also led to 600,000 Algerians being displaced from their farms into precarious economic situations. The need for water also led to more land use changes by the French in the 1920s, who installed irrigation systems and dams in order to feed their citrus groves. Thanks for listening.